So the Shroud of Turin, it's a linen cloth, roughly 14 feet long, bearing the faint image of Jesus on it. It was discovered in France in the 1350s when a French knight presented it as the burial cloth of Jesus. And when it appeared, large crowds flocked to see it, and it became this famous thing. It has since risen in notoriety as evidence of a miracle and proof that Jesus existed, proof of Jesus' divinity. It was even parodied in an episode of The Simpsons where Homer sees a face in a grilled cheese sandwich. So why is this important? Is it really a miracle? And what does the Bible have to say? Let's take a look.
Attention, bargain shoppers.
So the Shroud of Turin is meaningful to a lot of believers, even today. The wounds match what you'd expect from a crucifixion. Wrists pierced, feet crossed, back torn. If nothing else, it forces people to visualize what the Gospels describe. And there is a mystery aspect to it as well. The image is not painted with like a pigment as you would expect to see, but rather it's more like a discoloration of the cloth fibers. And when photographed in 1898, the negative revealed a more detailed image of the face and the body. So this moved it from like interesting relic into kind of scientific curiosity. What is it? How was it made? There have been a whole bunch of studies on it trying to figure out how this was done. Radiation, heat, chemical reaction. You've got all these different explanations, some more plausible than others, but none are completely definitive. So this ambiguity about how it was created gives the shroud weight, an aura of mystery. It almost feels like something that shouldn't exist, but yet there it is. However, there are some problems with it. So in 1988, they carbon dated it, and 3 separate labs dated the cloth as from between 1260 and 1390 AD. Now this supports the historical record that shows that the shroud showed up in the 1350s, but this wasn't the first century. This wasn't a burial shroud of Jesus. But you could say, well, maybe that's when God did the miracle. Maybe it wasn't Jesus' actual face, maybe it was something God did later. All right, but then there's the style of the image. The face on the shroud looks exactly like how Western medieval people would have imagined Jesus to look. Got the long hair, got the narrow nose, got the trimmed beard, he's tall, he's symmetrical. But Jewish men in the first century region of Galilee didn't look like the icons of medieval Europe. They were shorter, they had darker skin, they didn't wear long hair. The shroud looks like what a medieval person would have thought Jesus looked like, not what an actual first century Jewish man probably did. Which is interesting because that's exactly how we view Jesus. Every single picture or painting you've ever seen of Jesus portrays him like a knight in the Middle Ages, not what he actually probably looked like. Additionally, Jewish burial customs in the time of Jesus involved wrapping his body in separate pieces of cloth and then leaving the face just covered with its own piece of cloth. Not a single 14-foot long shroud like the Shroud of Turin is. But again, that method is more consistent with medieval interpretations of the death of Jesus, not consistent with actual first century Jewish practices. Additionally, medieval artists did know how to use different medians, and they actually were able to create these negative-like images. In fact, they were constantly doing this because religious relics actually sold for a lot of money. It was part of the medieval economy. So producing a powerful image of Christ for devotional purposes would have fit right into the marketplace in medieval times. That's not proof of anything, but it is a plausible motivation. So the Shroud of Turin, I'm going to go ahead and say probably not a divine miracle. Of course, I could definitely be wrong, but based on everything we know, it seems like that's probably not the case. But if it's medieval, that doesn't erase what it represents. It reflects how deeply Christians throughout the centuries have tried to visualize and honor the suffering of Jesus. It also creates discussion about how much we are influenced by this medieval representation of what Jesus was, and how medieval Europe shaped Christianity, and we're still experiencing that even today. Even though what we view of Jesus through the Western lens doesn't really have anything to do with his actual ethnicity or appearance. I mean, if the shroud is genuine, it is an extraordinary artifact. So there's not a lot of scripture in this episode, but I am reminded of one verse. There's a story where Jesus was debating with a Samaritan woman, and they were debating about the physical. She said, "My people worship up on the mountain. Your people say that we need to worship in the temple." And so they were talking about the physical. But Jesus says to her, "But the hour is coming and is now here when the true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and in truth. For the Father is seeking such people to worship him." So it's not about physical places or objects or artifacts. It's about genuinely worshiping God in your heart. What do you think? Is the Shroud of Turin a real miracle or a piece of medieval art? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Let me know in the comments below. Also, please feel free to like and subscribe. It does help out the channel. I'll leave the verses used today in the description. My name is Adam. This is Bargain Bin Theology. And remember, you get what you pay for.